Your Honor, is it all right if they're seated?
Yes, you may be seated. Sorry about that. Have a seat.
I want to introduce your presiding judge. This is Brandon Hughes, national champion, All-American, now practicing trial lawyer here in Los Angeles. You're in good hands. Your Honor, the courtroom is yours.
All right, thank you, Justin. Okay. Let's get my ballot. Okay. Okay, sounds good. All right. Good morning, everybody. So we are now on the record for State of Peter Jones v. Dragon Studios. We'll start with appearances.
Good morning, Your Honor. My
Morning.
name is Devika, Narendra, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Miss Johnny Wynn. Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Together, we represent the estate of Mr. Peter Jones. Would you like introductions from the defense first or some pretrial matters?
Yeah, let's hear from the defense. All right, we'll get introductions, then we'll start with whatever preliminary matters you have. Introductions from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor, and you might hear me twice.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll try and
Good
deal
morning.
with it.
My name is Everett Parker-Noblitt, here along with my co-counsel, Mr. Luke McLaughlin.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Represented today by Cole Boyd
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
on behalf of Dragon Studios.
Okay, all right, so it's on behalf of Dragon Studios. All right, before we proceed to opening statements, do we have any preliminary matters you'd like to attend to?
Just two, Your Honor.
Okay.
First, we'd like to invoke Rules of Evidence 603 and 615. These are going to swear in all witnesses and constructively sequester them, barring party representatives.
Any objection to invoking those rules?
No, Your Honor, we'd just like to note that our party representative is Ms. Doyle.
Okay, so witnesses are constructively sworn, witnesses are constructively sequestered, aside from the party rep, I presume.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, those rules are invoked.
Yes, Your Honor. The second, you might have noticed this row of laptops behind here.
I did.
We just wanted to give the court notice that there's going to be an exhibit that's a video we'll be using today.
Okay.
At one point during trial, we're going to take a moment just to set up these laptops throughout the room so the jury and the witness can see these videos all at the same time.
Okay, I take it you've seen the exhibits.
Yes, Your Honor, we review it. We have no problem with that.
Any objection to the process that was laid out here?
No, Your Honor, that's fine with us.
Okay, that sounds good. Anything else?
That's all. We're ready for opening statements.
Okay. Any preliminary matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, just one. Before trial, opposing counsel and I prepared a binder full of documents,
Okay.
the exhibits for the witnesses. We're just going to leave it here on this witness bench table so they can flip through it for time's sake.
Okay, any objection to that procedure?
None of that.
Okay, so there's no objection. Feel free.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to go.
All right, that sounds good. So we will move on to opening statements, of course, starting with the plaintiff. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, opening statements, starting with the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. The defendant let him fall too low. By then, it was too late. Members of the jury, this is a negligence case. And this is Peter Jones. We're here because Mr. Jones died on the defendant's watch. Mr. Jones was a famous actor. He'd been starring in the defendant's movies for years. Mr. Jones was known for pulling off some of the craziest stunts in Hollywood. That is until the defendant took his last stunt too far. It's June 2023. And the defendant has Mr. Jones on a motorcycle at the edge of a cliffside. Mr. Jones is supposed to drive straight off. You might ask yourself why he'd ever agree to do that. But you're going to hear it's because Mr. Jones thought he and the defendant had a plan. You'll hear he thought the defendant was going to keep him safe. You see, members of the jury, you're going to hear there was only one way for this stunt to be pulled off safely. For Mr. Jones to use the parachute on his back. And as Mr. Jones is falling thousands of feet down to the ground, he had to pull it at the right time. You'll hear it was the defendant's job to tell him when to pull. The defendant never did. June 21st of last year, Mr. Jones performs the stunt. He drives his motorcycle off a cliff. He's thousands of feet in the air alone. Nothing and no one around him. He's waiting for a signal. So you're going to hear he was wearing this earpiece. And it was through this earpiece that the defendant was supposed to tell him when to pull. So Mr. Jones waits. He's falling. He waits. He's falling. He waits for the defendant to tell him when to pull. But it's silent. He doesn't hear it. And as he gets closer and closer to the ground and it's still silent, closer and closer to the ground and there's no signal, Mr. Jones starts to feel like something's wrong. He tries pulling his parachute. By then, it was too late. Because the defendant had let him fall too far. Mr. Jones couldn't land safely. And as he plummets towards the ground, there's nothing he can do to stop himself. His parachute won't work. He's alone. There's no signal from the defendant. And he hits the ground. Dead on impact. Members of the jury, we brought a case of negligence against the defendant because she never gave him the signal to pull. When we brought that case, we took on a burden. But the defense, we have it on a good faith basis. They're going to concede all of the elements of that negligence suit. In a moment, Mr. Parker-Noblitt's going to get up here and tell you that the defense, they were negligent. But that it was Mr. Jones who assumed the risk of that negligence. Now, Mr. Jury, I want to make one thing very clear. Throughout trial today, you're going to hear about a lot of decisions Mr. Jones made, a lot of decisions the defendant made, a lot of decisions these movie producers made, but there was one thing that was always supposed to happen. Mr. Jones was supposed to get the signal to pull. And he didn't. So we're going to prove two facts to you today. First, that the defendant acted negligently when she never gave him the signal to pull his parachute. You're going to hear that there was a clear plan in place. That it was the defendant's job to give that signal, and on the day of the accident, the defendant said nothing. Second, you're going to hear that it was the defendant's actions that killed Mr. Jones. By the end of today's trial, it'll be clear. There was only ever one way Mr. Jones would survive this accident. And it was by pulling his parachute at the right time, and if he'd gotten a signal, Mr. Jones would be here today. You'll hear that the only reason Mr. Jones is dead is because the defendant didn't tell him to pull. She let him fall too low. And by then it was too late. It's too late for Mr. Jones. But it's not too late for you to hold the defendant accountable. At the end of today's trial, I'll ask you to find the defendant liable for negligence. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, counsel. All right. We'll now hear the opening statement from the defense. Mr. Parker-Noblitt? Noblitt. Are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can proceed.
Your Honor. Ms. Narendra. Members of the jury. He chose the stunt. He chose the risks. He chose to drive. Before we get into anything, I want to take a step back and focus on one thing Ms. Narendra just told you. Peter Jones drove a motorcycle off a cliff. I think we probably all remember where we were when that happened. You see, for the last 2 decades, Peter Jones was the biggest actor in North America, watched by tens of millions on the movie screen. When we saw him up there, it was like a god, clinging onto moving planes, clinging off mountaintops. Peter Jones made us all believe in the impossible. But underneath all of that, it was all too easy to forget that Peter Jones is a real person, just like you or me. Underneath every single one of those stunts, Peter Jones was human. And that's why we're here. You see, members of the jury, we're here in court because Peter Jones made dangerous decisions. And we're not here to look back on them and judge him. We're not here to go back and question what that means about him as a person. We're here to answer one very simple question. Did Peter Jones assume the risk when he jumped off that cliff? As members of the jury, the law says, if we prove that he did, you can't find Dragon Studio liable. We're going to prove just that. Because he chose that stunt. He chose the risks. And he chose to drive. So what exactly does that mean for us today? Assumption of risk. It's something we probably don't hear about in our day-to-day lives. The judge is actually going to instruct you at the end of today's trial. It's pretty simple. When we walked into court today as the defense, we had the burden to prove 3 things to you by a preponderance of the evidence. All that means is they're more likely than not. First, that Peter Jones voluntarily took part in that activity, jumping that motorcycle off that cliff. Second, that he knew and appreciated the risks of that jump. And third, when he did that, that action caused his death. And we'll meet that burden today. Members of the jury, that doesn't mean there isn't other fault to go around. As Ms. Narendra mentioned, Dragon Studios has already admitted they were negligent. It was negligent to let Peter Jones jump a bike off a cliff. That never should have happened. But we're not here in court to look at that action. We're here to look at Peter Jones's decisions and to determine whether or not he assumed that risk. And we'll prove that to you today. Because of those three simple facts. He chose the stunt. He chose the risks. And despite that fact, he chose to drive. Let's take those one at a time, members of the jury, starting with that first one. He chose the stunt. Because we expect the plaintiff will call Peter Jones's agent, who will have to admit to you, it wasn't Dragon Studios' idea to have that stunt take place. It was Peter Jones. And beyond that, that takes us to our second fact. He knew the risk. Today you're going to see a contract that Peter Jones signed where he acknowledged the risk of death. And beyond that, just one day before that stunt took place, you'll learn, Peter Jones admitted to the press he thought he could die. And that takes us to that third fact. He chose to drive. We're going to call the producer and director of that movie, Ms. Doy, to the stand, and she'll walk you through that day. She'll tell you how Peter Jones got on that motorcycle, how he hit the gas and drove off that cliff and jumped off. At the end of the day, members of the jury, Peter Jones made the choice to drive. And it's because of those three choices. At the end of today's trial, I'm going to come before you one more time. I'll ask you to review the evidence and answer that one question, and ask you to find Dragon Studios not liable. Thank you for your time.
All right, Mr. Parker-Noblitt, thank you very much. I'm going to see if this is slightly more comfortable for me. In the meantime, if the plaintiff is ready, you can call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Mr. Eli Gobion.
Okay. Mr. Gobion?
Gobion, Your Honor.
Gobion. Mr. Gobion, you are sworn. Counsel, you may proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Would you mind introducing yourself to the members of the jury?
Name's Eli Benjamin Gobion.
Why are you here with us today?
Well, I'm what you call a talent agent, Mr. Jones. I worked with him to set up on all his different movies, the role of his dreams. And some just to take this.
Would you recognize a picture of Mr. Jones today?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel with pre-marked and pre-admitted Exhibit 3. It's a picture of Mr. Jones.
The record will so reflect.
And Mr. Gobion, I believe if you look in that binder, flipping to Exhibit 3, you'll see Mr. Jones. And permission to publish to the members of the jury.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you may publish.
Would you mind telling the members of the jury a bit about Mr. Jones?
Yes, ma'am. He was the world's leading action superhero. James Bond, Jason Bourne, played a character named Travis Harper in all the different all-loss movies, the whole franchise.
The All Lost movies, did they involve stunts?
Every single one of them. I mean, the guy would be going off of cliffs, hanging off of planes, did death-defying stunts.
Mr. Gobion, I want to talk about one stunt in particular. Did you work with him on his last movie?
Yes, ma'am. All loss 7.
Could you tell us about the stunt that was supposed to happen in that movie?
I mean, it was the craziest stunt I'd ever seen. The guy was on a motorcycle, right? He's driving off of a cliff, and he starts free falling. Had to pull a parachute just to glide safely to the ground.
Hold on a minute. Who was involved in planning that stunt?
Well, I mean, I was there. Mr. Jones, he was there. And then you had the producer and the stunt coordinator.
Did you guys have a plan for how to execute the stunt safely?
Yes, ma'am. We drew up some terms and contracts and agreements and all the fancy language.
Would you recognize that if you saw it today?
I think I would.
Approaching opposing counsel with pre-marked Exhibit 34. This is a stunt.
Okay.
Mr. Gogion, if you flip to Exhibit 35 in that binder, let me know when you're ready.
Gotcha.
Can you identify what you're looking at?
Yes, and this is the stunt plan that we drew up with all the different terms of what we'd be doing to make sure that stunt would be safe.
Does it look the same as when you wrote it and signed it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 34.
Any objection to admitting 34?
Without objection.
Okay, Exhibit 34 is admitted.
Mr. Gogion, can you tell us what this plan talks about?
Yeah, well, when the guy's falling, right, it's not like you can leave him out high and dry in the air. He had to wear an earbud headphone, and we'd be radioing in the producer saying, pull the parachute whenever it was time.
How long was the producer supposed to wait before giving that signal?
It says no longer than 4 seconds.
Mr. Gogion, I want to talk about whether that plan was followed on the day of the accident. Were you there that day?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Where were you?
Well, I was there in the control room, myself, and the producer watching the stunt go down.
Mr. Gogion, do you know how long the producer was going to wait before giving that signal?
I mean, I saw it happen. It wasn't 4 seconds. It all started from this conversation we had with the guy the night before.
Let's talk about that conversation the night before. Who was there?
Mr. Jones, he was there, and I was there, and I mean, we were celebrating. We were having a good time because we just pulled the thing off. I mean, we did it, job done. But then the producer, he walks up to us and he started saying some things that struck me a little odd.
Miss Doig, the producer, walks up. What does she start saying?
Well, she goes, we got to do it again. Looked at the footage, started complaining. Sounded like my ex-girlfriend. Too short, not impressive, not good enough. I was like, what the heck? We just pulled off the stunt of a lifetime, and this is what I'm getting?
Did the producer have a plan for how to change that?
Yeah, she said she's going to wait longer. Not 4 seconds. 9 seconds. Make sure you get a longer shot.
Did Mr. Jones agree to wait that 9 seconds?
Yes, ma'am. Only after the producer promised that it would be safe, according to the stunt coordinator.
At any time in that conversation, did the producer mention waiting longer than 9 seconds?
No, ma'am. I mean, she promised right then and there, don't you worry, it'll be 9 seconds.
She promised it would be 9 seconds. I want to talk about whether that's what happened. Mr. Gogion, on the day of the accident, did the defendant give the signal at 9 seconds?
No, ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, there's currently no foundation on the record as to how this witness would know how much time had elapsed at that point. Absent that foundation, this testimony is not admissible.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. A bit ago in this direct examination, Mr. Gogion told us he was in the control room with the defendant the day of the accident. He was watching as the defendant was supposed to give the signal and didn't. He would be able to count to 9 seconds, Your Honor.
Response?
Yes.
Your Honor, we have no foundation as to what his reference point was to how long it had been from that jump to when the actual instruction was given. Here in court today, we have a clock with the benefit of a second hand. There's no foundation. He had that at the time this happened.
All right, just to make it clear for the record, lay a little bit more foundation. The objection is sustained pending that foundation being laid, which I presume you will do.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Gogion, when you were in the control room, were you able to tell how much time was passing?
Yeah, I mean, we got this big old TV monitor with a clock counting the seconds after that bike leaves the ramp. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, so we could see when it hit that 9-second mark.
What happened when it hit 9 seconds?
Well, I'm watching, right? The bike goes off the cliff, free fall, and the timer starts. We get up to 9 seconds. I'm thinking this guy's going to pull the radio. She says, pull the parachute. That's what I expected, right? Didn't happen.
Miss Doig didn't pull the parachute at 9 seconds. Did you do anything?
I mean, I was like, why aren't you using the radio? I mean, you said you were going to tell her at 9 seconds, right? So I said, what are you doing? She put her hand like she was trying to keep me quiet, just kept staring at the timer go up 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds.
Did she ever signal to Mr. Jones?
I was watching the whole time. Just kept staring at the screen. Never once turned on that mic.
What happened to Peter Jones?
By the time he pulled the parachute, it was too late. Too much speed, too low to the ground. Hit the ground too fast.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Gobion. Nothing further at this time.
All right, thank you, counsel. Mr. Parker-Noblitt, any cross-examination for Mr. Gogion?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. With the court's permission.
You may.
Good morning, Mr. Gogion.
Morning, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I just got a few questions about the person you represent, Mr. Jones, okay?
Shoot.
Let's start by talking about what stunt Peter Jones chose to perform, okay?
Go right ahead.
Because, sir, you were Peter Jones's agent for quite a while, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Actually, my first client.
And as his agent, you were with him for a lot of discussions about your films, right?
Well, yeah, you're not going to keep me out of the loop.
That's right. You had to have your agent there to sign contracts, right?
Yes, sir.
Hear ideas,
That's right.
pitch ideas.
Yes.
And one of those meetings you were there for was for that All Lost 7 film, right?
That's right. I was there for the preparation and the plan.
I want to see if we can set the scene for the jury here about that meeting. You actually met with Ms. Doig, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
That was the producer of the movie.
Yes, sir.
You met with a stunt professional, right?
That's right.
And then right by your side, that was Mr. Jones.
My right-hand man.
Now, your right-hand man was actually pitching the ideas for the film, right?
Well, sure. I mean, we were all pitching in.
So even though Ms. Doig was the producer there, Peter Jones was actually the one pitching ideas.
Right, we got Peter pitching ideas. We had the stunt coordinator talking about how to keep it safe, and Miss Doig talking about how it was going to get shot.
Sir, the idea Peter Jones chose to pitch was to jump a motorcycle off a cliff, right?
Yes, sir, that was the premise, and then we got to work figuring out how to keep that thing safe.
I mean, sir, when you heard that, that shocked you, right?
Well, sure. I mean, everything he says ends up shocking me. One time it's hanging off a plane, next time it's riding off of a cliff. What's next? Come on now.
That's right. You said he held onto moving planes, but you thought this was his most dangerous stunt yet.
Well, sure.
You said it was crazy.
Absolutely.
But, sir, as you sat there with Peter Jones, you didn't tell him stop, right?
Well, no, what we did was we got to work figuring out how the heck we were going to keep this thing safe.
That's right.
Put a lot of work into that.
My apologies, sir. You and Peter got to work writing up a contract, right?
Sure.
You'd recognize that if I showed it to you?
Yes, sir.
Now, sir, I'm going to be referencing Exhibit 33. It should be right there, I believe, one page in front.
Appreciate it.
Now, that's the contract that you and Mr. Jones signed, right?
That's right.
It looks fair and accurate.
Sure does.
Your Honor, we move Exhibit 33 into evidence.
Okay, any objection to admitting 33?
Without objection.
Okay, Exhibit 33 is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, sir, I want to go through a few details of this contract. Because this contract actually references that stunt plan you talked about on direct examination, right?
Right, all the stuff we agreed upon to make sure it'd be A-okay.
That's right. It says right here on the top line, Peter Jones was going to jump a motorcycle up a 2,700-foot cliff.
Right.
It said he was going to do it, not any stunt performer.
Well, sure, he always did his stunts.
Right, he actually told you he refused to let anyone else do it.
Well, yeah, normally he'd do his own stunts.
Sir, this plan, it also references some risks that could come because of it, right?
Well, sure, I mean, whenever you got someone doing stunts, there's risk. That's why we plan so much, to make sure we keep those risks to a low.
Well, let's talk about what risks Peter Jones chose to take on. Sir, let's flip back to that contract. Right here at the bottom, it talks about risks Peter Jones could face, right?
Yes, sir.
It says right here, that could include the risk of serious injury, right?
That's right.
Not just serious injury, sir, it also could include the risk of death.
That's right. I mean, if we don't do what we say we're gonna do to keep it safe, something can go wrong.
For Peter Jones signed this document, didn't he?
That's right. I mean, he says, I accept the risks if the studio provides a safe set and environment during the production of the film.
That's right, sir. He signed a document saying he accepted the risk of death, didn't he?
Well, I mean, yeah, so long as we go by what we said in that stunt plan, nothing to worry about, right?
I'll be publishing to the jury, Your Honor.
Any objection?
And no objection.
All right, you may.
Now, sir, we talked about the risks Peter Jones chose to take on. I'd like to talk about what he chose to do on June 21st. Because, sir, you were there that day, weren't you?
Sure was. Saw it all happen.
Sir, you were in the control room, weren't you?
Yes, with Miss Doig.
You had that big screen you were watching on.
Right, I was watching the timer like a hawk. I couldn't keep my eyes off of it.
You were also watching Mr. Jones, right?
Right. Motorcycle, timer right here, so I could see how many seconds had gone by.
Let's talk about what Mr. Jones did. You saw him walk up that ramp, right?
Yes.
It was a 2,700-foot cliff he was standing on top.
Right, I mean, it's what we did the day before,
He got on that motorcycle.
like the day before,
He hit the gas.
like the day before. Yeah, yes, sir.
Mr. Gobian, you saw Peter Jones accelerate that motorbike off a cliff, right?
I mean, yeah, just like what happened. The only difference was what happened on our end, the control room.
Sir, I'm just asking what you saw. You saw Peter Jones choose to ride that motorcycle off a cliff.
I mean, yeah, that's what we agreed. That's the whole point, right?
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
All right, Mr. Parker-Noblitt. Any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed when you are ready, Ms. Narendra.
Mr. Gogion, on cross-examination, Mr. Parker-Noblitt asked you about this contract. Does it reference the stunt plan?
Yeah, I mean, we're agreeing. Look, we'll do it so long as we go by what's in the stunt plan, what we all worked so long to make sure would be safe.
And did the defendant give Peter Jones the signal to pull on the day of the accident?
No, I mean, it was like that stunt plan got crumpled up, thrown out the window. Wasn't 4 seconds, wasn't even 9 seconds. He just didn't say nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Gobion. I got nothing further, and barring any recross, we're fine with him stepping down.
All right, well, let's look into that. Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Gogian, thank you for your time. You're excused.
Appreciate it, y'all.
Plaintiff, any further witnesses to call or evidence to present?
We've got no further witnesses. We rest our case in chief at this time.
Okay, is the defense ready to proceed with their case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Dragon Studios can call its first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Dragon Studios calls Miss Doig to the
Okay.
stand.
Ms. Doig, you're sworn. Counsel, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you go ahead and introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi. My name is Cole Doig.
What do you do for work?
I'm a producer. I help make movies. I'm the CEO of Dragon Studios.
How did you become a producer?
Well, when I was a kid, my dad, he was a big movie buff. He would bring me to the theaters and watch movies together. It was my favorite thing. And growing up, all my friends, they wanted to be in the movies, but I just wanted to help make them. I like making movies. I like making people happy.
And you said you make movies. Who do you make movies with?
Well, I make movies with that company, Dragon Studios. I work with a crew. I work with writers, directors all the time, and of course the actors.
And did you work with an actor named Peter Jones?
I sure did. Peter and I worked together on the whole All Lost movie franchise. We worked together for about 7 years before he passed.
Now, have you been in court throughout trial today?
I have.
Were you here when we admitted in opening statements your company was negligent?
I was, and listen, that was my biggest regret, was letting Peter go up there that day. I'll never forget it.
And then with that in mind, I'd like to take a step back and talk about Peter Jones's choices. Ma'am, what movie franchise was Peter Jones a part of?
Well, the franchise was called All Lost. 2022, we've made about 6 of them so far, and well, it was about this guy. He was about to solve all these mysteries, and he'd do all these crazy stunts in the movies.
What crazy stunts?
God, you name it, Peter done it. He was hanging off the mountains. He was dangling off the buildings. He would walk into my office, and I just couldn't believe the things he was asking me to do. That was
Objection to an improper use of character evidence may be heard, Your Honor.
What specific testimony are you contending is improper character evidence?
Your Honor, the testimony of all of the other crazy stunts that Mr. Jones has asked to do, opposing counsel is characterizing Mr. Jones as a risk-taking individual to prove that in this instance, he once again would take the risk of performing a crazy stunt. They're using this to prove conformity.
Response?
Response, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, first we believe counsel opened the door to this portion of testimony on their direct examination of Mr. Gogian, in which they actually went into specific instances that Peter Jones did these dangerous stunts, specifically that plane that he hung off of and holding onto that cliffside.
Okay.
Further, Your Honor, we believe this actually falls under a permitted use of character evidence under Rule 404B. This is going to be used to show Peter Jones's intent in doing those actions, if I could proffer.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we believe this witness is going to testify that Peter Jones expressed wanting to top all of his other stunts. From that first stunt, he progressively made those stunts more dangerous, culminating in the stunt that ultimately caused his death. It's his intent.
Okay, so sounds like we have 3 issues here. Opening the door and a permitted use of character evidence as an indication of intent. What are your, 2. What are your responses to those issues?
Yes, Your Honor. First, to the issue of opening the door, Mr. Gogian just discussed what prior movies he'd worked with Mr. Jones on. What Ms. Doig specifically said was she thought that Mr. Jones was asking to do crazy stunts, characterizing these as risk-taking and crazy. That goes one step further. And, Your Honor, to the 404B argument, Your Honor, this does not prove specific intent to this stunt on June 21st. We've heard no connection as to how these prior acts would connect to this stunt. They're simply using this to characterize Mr. Jones as a risk-taking individual. Ms. Doig specifically said that he was choosing risky, crazy stunts.
Okay, well argued on both sides, the objection's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, you mentioned some crazy stunts. Would you recognize some pictures of those?
Of course, I shot all of them with my company.
Ms. Doig, if you could turn to exhibits 26 through 30 there. I'm going to ask you to look at them, see if you recognize them.
I'm there.
Do you recognize these documents?
I do. This is Peter. Peter doing all those stunts I mentioned.
Do they look the same as when you shot those movies?
Yeah, they do.
Your Honor, we'd move exhibits 26 through 30 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yeah, without objection.
Okay, exhibits 26 through 30 are admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Doig, I'd like to take these pictures one at a time, starting with that first one. What are we looking at here?
Well, that's Peter. It's one of our earliest movies, All Lost 2. And, well, he's hanging off a mountain 5,000 feet in the air. That was where we started off.
You said that's where you started off, ma'am. What was that second stunt we have here?
Well, that's Peter. And, that's when he wanted to rappel down the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. It was, it still is, the tallest building in the world.
What about that third stunt?
Well, that's Peter, this time he wanted to hang off an airplane, and I asked him, I said, Peter, you want to hang off it when it's moving? And he said, yeah, I want to hang off it when it's moving, and he did it, he made it happen.
What about the fourth one?
Well, this one was a little different, and, this one he's underwater, and, he told me that he'd train and train and train to be able to hold his breath underwater for 6 whole minutes, and he did it.
I mean, let's flip to that last exhibit there, exhibit 30. What are we looking at?
Well, that's Peter skydiving with a cameraman there to watch him fall.
Your Honor, this time we'll be publishing to the jury.
Any objection?
No objections to that.
All right, you may publish.
Now, ma'am, you told us earlier Peter wanted to top those stunts. What did he do after jumping out a moving plane?
Well, for this movie, we've made 6 of them already. Our audiences, they were expecting a lot, we thought. So we all felt like we wanted to top the last one, and he decided he wanted to drive off a cliff in Norway on a motorcycle and then let go midair.
Ms. Doig, you said Peter Jones decided to do that. Who pitched that idea?
Peter did. Peter came up with all his stunts. It was his thing. It's what he's known for.
Then I want to move on and talk about the day Mr. Jones was killed. Ma'am, where were you that day?
I was on set. I was producer of the movie, and I've been working with Peter for, the last year to make sure he was prepared.
Did you set up that stunt?
We set up the stunt with the stunt coordinator and the rest of the crew, and we built this ramp, going off the mountain. It wouldn't be in the shot, but that's how he would fly off.
Now, Ms. Doig, this might sound like a strange question, but I have to ask. At any point, did you threaten Mr. Jones into doing that act?
No, of course not. It was Peter's decision all the way.
Ma'am, did you force him to ride that motorcycle off a cliff?
Of course not. I've been working with the guy for 7 years. He was one of my best friends.
So what did happen?
Well, at first, everything was normal. And, Peter got on his bike like he had the first 6 times, and he drove off. He drove off the cliff like we had planned. And I'm in the control room, and I'm with the agent, and 7 seconds go by, 8 seconds, and 9 seconds hit, and I scream in the earbud. I yell, "Deploy, deploy, pull the parachute!" And he doesn't do it. And I don't know why I couldn't hear him back, but I just saw his hands by his side, and he didn't do it.
Ma'am, do you know what happened to Mr. Jones after he didn't pull that cord?
Yeah,
crew that was in the plane, you know, they were supposed to oversee what was happening, and they saw him at the bottom of the mountain, and they said he was dead. And so, we went to go check on him. He's dead.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
All right, thank you, counsel. All right, Ms. Narendra, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed when you're ready.
Before I begin, can I get a time check?
8 minutes for presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Doyle.
Good morning.
My name is Devika, Narendra, and I'm going to ask you some questions on behalf of the Jones family.
Of course.
I understand this might be difficult for you, so try to get you out of here as soon as possible.
Thank you, ma'am.
I want to start with one thing you and I can both agree on. There was only one way for Peter Jones to survive this stunt, and it was to pull his parachute at the right time.
That's right. We had him practice going off the mountain and pulling that parachute 1,000 times each. We wanted him to be able to do it when he was asleep.
If he pulled the parachute too late, he wouldn't have enough time to land safe.
That's right. The latest that parachute could go out was 13.3 seconds.
I want to talk about how Mr. Jones would know when that 13.3 seconds passed. He was wearing an earbud.
That's right. That was the earbud we were supposed to use to communicate with him when he was in the air. How we were supposed to signal to him to open his parachute.
This was how you specifically were supposed to signal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it was me, sometimes it was the stunt coordinator, sometimes it was someone else in the crew. It depended on the day.
On the day of the accident, you were on the other end of that earbud.
Absolutely. I had a walkie-talkie, and that's how I told him to pull.
Mr. Wigg, it was your job to tell Mr. Jones when to pull that parachute.
Absolutely, ma'am. On the 21st, it was my job.
I want to talk about whether you made that call. Mr. Wigg, you're aware that the accident was recorded.
That's right.
Would you recognize that video if you saw it again?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, we're going to be setting up that video exhibit right now. We'll put a computer by the members of the jury and give one to Mr. Wigg.
Okay. And that's the procedure as it was explained during preliminary matters. Any objections now that you see the beginning to the setup here?
No objection, Your Honor. We would just like to make one note for the record, if it's amenable to counsel, that this exhibit...
Outside,
Yes, Your
constructively
Honor.
outside the press. I don't know what this is.
Yes,
yeah,
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
We'd just like to admonish the jury about the fact that this recording is without audio. It doesn't show whether or not anything was said on that radio.
That's not necessary. There's no audio. We'll see that there's no audio.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, and this exhibit has already been pre-admitted to.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mr. Wigg, I want to walk through this video step by step. Counsel, if you could start playing. Here we're seeing as Mr. Jones drives up the ramp about to take off. Now your countdown, give him the signal to pull. It started the moment that he left that ramp.
That's right, ma'am.
So on the day of the accident, you claim you gave him the signal to pull 9 seconds after this shot we're seeing right now.
That's right. I was supposed to tell him to deploy it in 9 seconds. We accounted for about 1 second reaction time where he would actually pull it at 10 seconds. And then by 13 seconds, the parachute was supposed to be fully open.
Mr. Wigg, let's watch the next 9 seconds of this clip. And now it's right here that you claim you gave Mr. Jones the signal to pull. Right?
That's right, man. This is seared in my memory because I was watching this on the 21st. This is when I was yelling at him to pull.
This is when you were yelling at him to pull, and he was supposed to reach behind and pull the parachute, Mr. Wigg.
That's right, man.
I want to see how long it takes him to pull that parachute. Counsel, if you could play, I'm going to count how long it takes Mr. Jones. 1, 2, him 4 seconds before he even moves his arm, Mr. Right?
That's right, and by then it was too late. I mean, the stunt coordinator and I told him, you have to do it at 9 seconds or you'll die.
It was too late. At that point, Mr. Jones didn't have enough time to land safely. We can agree. Now, Miss Doig, just the day before this stunt, you and Mr. Jones had performed it multiple times, right?
That's right.
You were the one giving him the signal the day before.
That's right, ma'am.
You performed the stunt 6 times.
That's correct, ma'am.
And can you tell me how many of those 6 times it took Mr. Jones 4 seconds to move his arm?
Ma'am, the first day we only waited 4 seconds to have him deploy the parachute, so all 6 times.
Ma'am, let me be clear here. I'm asking, after you gave the signal those 6 times, did it take Mr. Jones 4 seconds to move his arm?
No, ma'am, we gave him the signal 4 seconds in.
Just the day before, Mr. Jones would pull his parachute instantly after your signal, right?
That's right, ma'am. I mean, we told him how important it was.
This day of the accident is the first time Mr. Jones took that long to even reach for his parachute.
That's right, ma'am.
I want to talk about what that could mean. I guess it could mean that his earpiece wasn't working. You agree?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, we tested the earbud before and after, and it seemed to be working.
Well, that's right, Mr. Doig. He actually tested his earpiece and it was working, so he would have received a signal if he didn't.
That's what we thought, ma'am. I mean, I wasn't up there with
Objection,
him.
Your Honor. Improper opinion may be heard.
You
Your Honor, opposing counsel's asking this witness to figure out whether or not that earpiece would have worked flying through the air at hundreds of miles per hour. There's been no foundation on the record that she has the needed knowledge to give that sort of testimony, and absent that, it's an improper opinion that's inadmissible in court.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doig just told us that she tested this earpiece before and after the accident. She used it 6 times the day before. My question to her was just that the earpiece worked, and to her knowledge, he would have received the signal if it worked.
Response, Your Honor?
If you phrase the question that way, I'm more inclined to find it permissible. So I'm going to sustain the objection and you can rephrase.
Yes, Your Honor, and move to strike that question.
I don't know that there was any testimony given in response to that, but if there was, it's stricken.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doig, if that earpiece worked, Mr. Jones would have gotten your signal to pull.
You would hear from yelling.
You have no reason to believe the earpiece didn't work.
We tested the equipment, yeah, but man, I can't tell you why he didn't deploy it.
Ms. Jones, I want to talk about whether your story is true. Because there were only 2 people in the control room on the day of the accident.
Well, there was also 12 crew members on the set, somewhere in the plane, somewhere on the set.
Ms. Doig, in the control room, it was just you and Mr. Gogia.
That's right.
You've been sitting here throughout trial today.
I have.
You heard when Mr. Gogion testified that you never gave Mr. Jones the signal.
I didn't, and man, I honest to God, I can't tell you why he thinks that. I mean, he was there when I was yelling, and I mean, he hurt me.
And I'm just looking for a yes or a no. You heard when he said you never gave the signal to pull.
I did, but I don't know why he said that.
Man, there's no one else here that can tell us you gave that signal to pull.
I'm the only one who could have beat her.
The only person's word we can take that you ever gave that signal, Ms. Doig, it's yours.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Doig. And thank you for answering my questions. Got nothing further.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. We just ask that Ms. Doig be allowed to step down.
All right, thank you, Ms. Doig. You may return to your seat. Okay. Any further witnesses to call or evidence to present?
With that, Your Honor, the defense rests their case in chief.
Okay. So we will proceed to closing arguments. Would counsel like 60 seconds before we proceed?
Sure, that'd be fine with
Let's
us.
take 60 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so we are ready to proceed to closing arguments. Of course, we'll start with the plaintiff, Ms. Narendra. You may
Yes.
proceed whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, and Mr. Parker-Noblitt, members of the jury, the defendant let him fall too low. And by then, it was too late. I trust you with my life. It's a common phrase. You might say it to a friend, a teammate, a partner. It's a way of letting someone know you trust them. But for most of us, saying that doesn't actually mean putting our lives in someone's hands. Most of us don't know what it feels like to know one person decides whether you live or die. That's where Peter Jones was different. He trusted the defendant with his life. It was the defendant that chose whether he lived or died, the defendant that chose whether to give him the signal to pull. Today you've seen she didn't. When she failed to give that signal, Mr. Jones plummeted towards the ground and died. And that's why we're suing the defendant for negligence. And the members of the jury, the defense has conceded that they were negligent. And that means the burden of proof shifts from our side of this table to theirs. The burden rests with the defense. And when you go back to deliberate, you are only going to be asked one simple question. Just like Mr. Parker-Noblitt asked you just a moment ago. Did Mr. Jones assume the risk of this stunt? See, members of the jury, throughout trial today, you heard a lot about how Mr. Jones did dangerous stunts in the past. You saw a ton of pictures of crazy things Mr. Jones did. Hanging off the side of a building, hanging off a plane. You heard how Mr. Jones agreed to this stuff. How this stunt was Mr. Jones' idea. And all of those things are true. Members of the jury, that would mean something if that's what we were saying was negligent, but it's not. We're saying the defendant was negligent because she never gave him the signal to pull. And one thing has been very clear throughout trial today. Mr. Jones never agreed to that. Mr. Jones never agreed to wait longer than 9 seconds. Mr. Jones never agreed to not get a signal at all. It's the defendant's word against Mr. Gogan's. You heard one witness say the signal was given, and one witness say it didn't. But think about what the defendant has to lose. Her career. The career she told us today she loves and she's dreamed of doing since she was a kid. Her company, her studio, her job. The only person here who told us the signal was given was the defendant. I mean, she told you there were 12 other crew members there. Where were they? Why wouldn't the defense put them on the stand to say, no, the signal was given. It's not Miss Doig's fault. Where was the recording? Where is the audio of that recording? Wouldn't the defense have it? But no. They chose to have you take only one person's word. The defendant. That doesn't meet the burden they've taken on. That doesn't prove more likely than not that the defendant gave the signal. It's not enough evidence. Beginning of today's trial, Mr. Parker-Noblitt told us that when watching Peter Jones, it's easy to see him as a god performing these crazy stunts, but that we have to remember Mr. Jones was human. just a person like you and I, and he is exactly right, he was. That's why Mr. Jones never performed any of these stunts alone. And it's why Mr. Jones could not survive the motorcycle stunt alone. Mr. Jones had a team. Mr. Jones had someone he relied on. Mr. Jones had someone he looked in the eyes and trusted with his life. Because Mr. Jones was only human. And the person he looked in the eyes and trusted with his life was the defendant, Miss Doyle. So the question you have to ask yourself is, did Miss Doyle give the signal or not? And you saw what happened. When Miss Doyle claimed she gave the signal, Peter Jones doesn't move, he's frozen in the air. And he doesn't pull until it's too late. He had one lifeline, the defendant. But she let him fall too far. And by then, it was too late. Find the defendant liable for negligence. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. All right, defense, you may proceed with the closing argument whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. At the beginning of trial today, Ms. Narendra asked a pretty good question. I wrote it down. After she broke the news to you that Peter Jones jumped off a cliff, she said 5 words. Why would he do that? Members of the jury, that's the question this case really comes down to. I think Mr. Gogion actually put it best when he was on the stand, Mr. Jones's agent. He answered that question. That's the whole point, right? Danger. Pushing the envelope, topping everything he'd done before. For members of the jury, today is a lesson in what happens when someone pushes too far. Because he chose that stunt. He chose that risk, and when he chose to drive, that cost Peter Jones his life. Now I'm going to start here by clarifying a few things. In today's case, it's true. We had the burden of proof. But despite what Ms. Narendra told you time and time again in her closing argument, it wasn't our job to dispute whether or not Peter Jones was told to pull. She actually said that word for word. The question in this case is whether or not he was given a signal. But I'm going to tell you, members of the jury, that's not the question before. In a moment, the judge is going to hand you this verdict form, and it's got one question on it. You're not going to see anything about a signal. You're not going to see anything about a warning. It's one very simple question. Did the defendant prove Peter Jones assumed the risk that caused his death? That's the question before you today. Members of the jury, that's exactly what we proved. He chose that stunt. He chose that risk he assumed, and he chose to drive. But you might be asking yourself, why? Why do we have that type of rule in the law? Why do we have people assume risks in the first place? Well, members of the jury, it's for a pretty good reason. We don't want to encourage people to do that kind of dangerous stunt. That's how people get killed. We don't want you driving drunk. If you go home after today, it's a Saturday evening. We don't want you to drink and go in your car and then sue someone because someone T-bones you. That's not how this works. Every single day, there are risks we take on. Whether or not it's smoking a cigarette, drinking alcohol, but members of the jury, this was a whole new level. Peter Jones jumped a motorcycle off a cliff. I mean, that should be something you struggle to wrap your head around, and that's the reason I've said that so many times. He jumped a motorcycle off a 2,700-foot cliff face. And the plaintiff can't have it both ways. Either this actual event was so dangerous, no one should have done it. One signal not coming through would be something that could kill a man, or it was fine. I mean, they've tried telling you this signal is what caused his death, but members of the jury, we don't know. They tried to tell you that this earpiece, we should have had that word come through, pull. And members of the jury, sure, one witness said that word was given, another said it wasn't, but that's not the point. Because something could go wrong. I mean, members of the jury, if you jump a motorbike off a cliff, it's not exactly a surprise that something could go wrong. Maybe an earpiece malfunction. Maybe a member of the staff wouldn't do their job correctly, but that's not something that was secret to Peter Jones. You have that contract in front of him. He acknowledged the risk of death when they're saying that was the stunt that was on the plane. I mean, think about that. You have the stunt plane they're saying was safe, and even then, Peter Jones was saying he could die. He admitted that both in writing and to the press. This stunt was dangerous. Members of the jury, basic common sense tells us that, but today the plaintiff has tried to hide behind that fact, but he can't get past the fact that those actions that Peter Jones took on were his choices, and it's tragic they had deadly consequences, but you can't blame Dragon Studios for that. So let's walk through that three facts we've said over and over again one last time. Ms. Doig took the stand. She told me it wasn't her idea for Peter Jones to jump a motorcycle off a cliff, it was Peter's. Peter Jones pitched that idea. Said it would be the best one yet. He clutched onto jet planes going at hundreds of miles per hour, but no. That wasn't risky enough. But after he chose that stunt, he chose the risk. He picked the cliff. They caught a plane to Norway. He found the perfect cliff for his movie and chose to jump it. Members of the jury, that was risky. That's the point. But after he chose that risk, he made the decision. He chose to drive. It was Peter Jones that got on that motorbike. It was Peter Jones that revved that engine. It was Peter Jones that drove right off that ramp and fell. Peter Jones chose those actions, and those actions caused his death. So let's walk through assumption. He volunteered to do that action. He knew the risks, was well aware of it. And third, those actions, that choice to jump off that cliff caused his death. So when you look at that form and answer that one question, did he assume the risk? Check yes. And find Dragon Studios not liable. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, any rebuttal?
Briefly, Your Honor.
You may proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Jones expected a signal, and it didn't come. He didn't know. Find Dragon Studios liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Right, so we'll go ahead and wrap up our ballots.